Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth and final Demystifying Post-Production series for the month of May, because we have tons of these as we move along. The subject is compositing 3D into videos and stills. And today we're going to talk predominantly about compositing, but as usual, we're going to digress and start saying other things unrelated to the subject. With me, I have three of my very good friends. One is hidden in the background, Carl Johnstone, that is doing the production. Anything that goes well, it's because of us three. Anything that goes wrong is because of Kyle. He has a responsibility for that. And next to me, I have my two friends, Lionel Vicidomini. And let me read you their bios. Lionel Vicidomini is a master trainer at Maxon and a teacher instructor in France at various training centers and schools. He worked for many years in the broadcast industry and for advertising agencies. My sympathies. Specializing in motion design, Lionel loves anything that moves and can be rendered, tracked, or edited. And for the next, I think, 2 days until the end of the month, he's providing you with a 75% discount of his Udemy course with the code that we will find online here. Let's, again, I'm trying to mess around. So go to udemy.com, find his course, and use the code Maxon_DPP_May, all caps, no gaps, and you can get that hefty discount. Next to him is my very good friend, Dustin Valkema, and he's a certified master trainer, 3D generalist, and composite photographer with over 15 years of industry experience. And he also does crossplay. He now focuses on education and mentorship through his company CG Hacks, which provides VFX overlays, 3D textures and material libraries, and other resources to bridge the gap between 2D and 3D workflows. Dustin's passion for helping others stems from his own experiences with failure and learning from them. He believes that with a bit of creative tenacity and a willingness to learn, anything is possible in the world of digital art. And you can go to his YouTube page over here, or his website, CG Hacks here. And I think, let me, before I go through the quick housekeeping, if you have any questions, please preface them with a capitalized question so we can distinguish it from other general comments. And you can email askthetrainer@maxon.net to suggest topics for future ATT and DPP shows and all that good stuff. So a bit of housekeeping, and I think I need to share my screen. So let me share my screen. See, that's one of the things I forgot to do. So there you go. And I'm gonna, where am I? There you go. So that is my screen. So go to the Maxon.net website to see all sorts of things that are happening, any offers, our software, and everything you need to know about Maxon. Go to the Maxon events page to see the events live and online. And also, the Design and Animation Tour is ongoing. June 11 is the next one in Nashville. Visit our YouTube channel, the Maxon Training Team, YouTube channel, the Maxon Training channel, and the Red Giant YouTube channel to see all the content we have. Of course, does ZBrush have their own YouTube channel? I'm not sure. I'm a bit out of the loop with these things. So Maxon certification, if you want to become a Maxon certified pro user or a certified trainer, go to this page here and look at all the details you will need to know. And finally, we have, go to our Maxon merch store .myshopify.com. Anyway, where's the link? I think we have it here. There you go. This is the link. Take a photo of this, and I'm going to paste it as well in the comments so you have it. And let's go to the comments and let's paste it here. I know that Carl can do that, but I'm sorry, I got carried away. And use the code Compositing3D, or uppercase no spaces, Compositing3D. And this is up to the next few days to get your free swag, paying only for shipping and handling. And unless I forgot anything else, which I'm going to be reminded, I'm sure, let's move on to the first presenter, the one and only me. So I'm going to go to my cheat sheet. I've got a cheat sheet on the left over here. And I would rather I make our faces a bit smaller, or even smaller than that. No, where's the smally one? There it is. So you can still see us, but at the same time, enjoy better resolution on your screens. So I'm going to talk predominantly about in-render compositing, to give you a few ideas on how to prepare stuff in order to get a render. And I think I have it here. If I put on my, this is the final scene we have here. And let me turn this on. And what we are seeing here is a final render of a 3D car, this car here, on a background that's just a flat image, no spherical panorama or anything like that. And in the process, I'm going to show you various little tricks. And let's just start with a little car and my Cinema 4D standard layout. So first of all, this is from the Asset Manager. If you type car here, car, not scissor, but car. My microphone is in the way, but I don't want to move it right now. It's this one here, the hot hatch. And the only thing I did is I got one of the preset car materials and replaced the body. Everything else is pretty much standard. And the first thing I need to do is just activate Redshift, because we're going to do things in Redshift. And another thing I like to do in Redshift, turn it to advanced, just make sure global illumination is brute forced, because I have a fast GPU. Actually, it was fast 3 years ago, and it's still decent. It's an RTX 5000 that came with my Dell workstation. Anyway, because I can't complain about speeds anymore, I put everything at the, to work as brute force. Now, in order to add some sort of backplate, and I'm going to switch to my Redshift view and turn it on, I'm going to add a Redshift camera, because since a couple of versions ago, the backplate has moved to the Redshift camera. I'm going to activate it, and you can go to the background here, and in the background, you can override it. And this is the equivalent of Cinema 4D's background object now, and it's a camera effect. And the one I'm going to use, I think it's called BG for background. It's one of these. I don't know why I've got three. I've probably got more than one libraries loaded. I've been messing around with these things. So I'm just going to drag it in here, and we're going to see our car floating in the air, which I think my contribution to humanity can end right here with this amazing masterpiece, a floating car. Okay, so the first thing I want to do in this particular case, I'm leaving everything in their default state other than the override here with the background. I'm going to eyeball the camera using techniques that we talked about in the first, I think, episode. And here we're going to see something quite interesting. Now, let me press Control and click here to close this. I'm going to do everything in my viewport. And you can see if I click here, I can open it again. You can do this with any window. So Control or Command on the Mac, click here, and the little hamburger icon. Now, there are some interesting effects you will observe. So the car now is in the middle here. I'm just rotating it because I want to find where the camera height is, if it's looking downwards or upwards. And I do that by looking at my horizon here. And what I saw is that, excluding my 3D car, the common, so to speak, element of this image is that above the tire, so look at this tire down here, just above it, if I place my horizon there, it seems to be above all the tires. And I know that different cars have different tire sizes, but overall, this is a smaller car. The horizon will seem a bit higher. This is also a small car. This is a bigger car, so it's going to be close to the tire. But if I, for example, place it here, my horizon is here, you can see that this car's tire goes through the horizon and this car is above the horizon. So obviously I'm not viewing it from the right angle. So bring the horizon to a point that aligns with things we can estimate that they're at the same height. And I think this angle is good enough. And we can rotate. Now I'm rotating my scene, but the background stays the same. Watch this now. So I'm going to show you something interesting. I'm pressing 1 on the keyboard and I'm just going to move the camera. Right? I'm gonna do some dolling and tracking. Right? If I bring my car down, this now looks like a model car. By the way, I'm not moving away from the camera, but it looks like a little model car. And if I move it up, this looks like a giant car within a garage. Right? It's touching the ceiling, and this is one. I call it the toy car. Let's say the toy car principle, that just by moving a 3D element in a static image, because our brain estimates sizes based on various things, we are unable here to perceive this as, we're viewing it from the wrong angle. Number one, because this car doesn't really have scale in terms of how we view it. And because it's always in the foreground and we assume the wheels are touching the ground, it makes our brains think that this is an extremely small car here, a model car, and it will be the effect will be even more pronounced if I do this. So this is a very small car. This is a very big car, and that's happening just by moving the car up and down. And by the way, I'm going to bring my chat so I can see it in case someone asks a question. Good. So what we need to do is not only estimate the height by rotating the camera and pressing 3 on my keyboard, but also make sure that the car is in such a position that doesn't look like a remote control car or a giant car. So I'm just playing around until things look, I'm just dolling in and out and moving it a bit up and down. The horizon stays the same because I'm not rotating the camera. And I'm going to place the car somewhere here. Okay. The more I bring it here, the smaller it becomes. The more I take it up, the larger it becomes. I'm going to bring it somewhere here and say it becomes larger. It doesn't become larger. Our brain perceives it as larger. Excellent. So let's assume that this is the final position of the car and everything looks great. And I'm really happy with the final placement. Now, let's activate our render view here. So off, on, good. And number one, we aren't getting any lighting because this is a background. This is not a dome light or anything like that. And let's bring some light in here. And the way to do this, just like as usual, is to bring in a dome light. I'm going to make this smaller so we can see the render better, a dome light. Now, there are no objects to interact with our car currently. So the dome light is white, and that's why we get this very desaturated lighting all the way around it. So what I'm going to do is go to the dome light and add, and I've got in my notes here, the park. So park. This one over here. Now you will see that the park is a totally different image. It's outside, it's got the sun and all that. And nonetheless, I'm going to drop it here. Now we get too much light on this side. All I have to do is rotate it 180 degrees, the dome light. So the light comes from the back. And there you go. I found that this works nicely just by trying 3 or 4 different spherical panoramas. And we're going to do some adjustment as far as the lighting is concerned. But we have some sort of lighting now that it doesn't look that dissimilar. And if you spend more than 3 minutes on this, you're going to find something that's even more aligned with your space. Now, if you are doing the shooting, you might as well, if it's for a commercial job, go and shoot HDR using, what's it called, Dustin, with the cameras, where you shoot different stops from the same position. Bracketing. Right.
Bracketing.
Yep.
Yes.
Yay, bracketing. And the more expensive your camera is, the more brackets you can shoot, and then use Photoshop to stitch them together into a high dynamic range image. Excellent. Now let's, right, I'm looking over there. Okay. One of the problems we're having here is that the reflections we're getting from all sides are from the dome light. And here we can see a bush or trees and all that. And I want to be able to get something that looks like my background. So let's go and create those reflective planes like I showed you the other day. So here's a plane. Let's just set it to 1, 1, one segment alone. I'm going to put it up so it's facing that way. And I'm going to start moving it to the side over here. I'm going to raise it up, and it's 400, so I'm going to raise it up by 200 because I want the bottom to touch the ground, because the car is touching the ground. That's the reason. And I'm going to rotate it so that the perspective is similar. It doesn't need to be very accurate to what I see in my background. There you go. Just follow this white line, and that looks fantastic already. And I'm going to extend it. There you go. And I'm going to extend it and move it in that direction over there. Now, if you wish, you can move it a bit more to the side here. It doesn't really matter where you're going to put it. Just make sure you don't bring it down. Just bring it closer to you if there's any, if it seems a bit too short. But nonetheless, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a material. So a Redshift material. Go to Redshift, Materials, and a Standard Material. And let's open it up. Now, this standard material here, I'm going to click over here. I wanted to have the same as the background, the image we have on the background. So let's go and get our the same background here. Let me just quickly find my garage. What was my garage? It was park. It wasn't park. It was BG. It was background, wasn't it? There you go. So get this, drag it in here. And in the standard material, I'm going to turn off my diffusion. I'm going to turn off my reflection, which are default. So I want everything off. And what I want on is in the emission channel, go to the color, press Command, click to add it here. So you can see we don't see emission here. So press Command and click in the color. So the color is here now. Drag it in here and set it to 1 because we need to have some emission. And I'm going to take this material, drag it on the plane, and make sure that the projection is frontal. So it projects it from the camera point of view. Excellent. So now the only thing that's happening is that we are getting that material projected from the same angle it's been, let's say, projected on the background. That's why you don't see a difference. And already, if I turn this on and off, let me make a bit more space so you can see. Now, observe this side of the car. I can turn it off, different reflection. I can turn it on, different reflection. So rest assured that this is capturing reflections that are coming from that plane. So it will be more, let's say it belongs more, the reflection belongs more to the environment. Rather than the high dynamic range image. And the fact that it's just a plane, you can't really see those scenes. Those be visible if you have a very reflective, glossy sphere where you can see all the details. But for things like a car or things that have some blurriness in the reflection, you won't be able to see those details. Now, what I'm going to do with this plane over here, let me turn this off for a second. I'm going to make it editable. I'm going to go to my edge, select the bottom edge, and use my control to drag my edge over and bring it approximately where the pillars are. And then press Control again, pull it up and do this, and then Control and pull it up to do this. So now we have this rectangle here that is receiving that frontal projection. So the reflection should be coming from 4 directions. altogether. Now, the problem that this poses is that now that rectangle is actually blocking the dome light. See, very little difference here. So what I want to do to tell Redshift that, well, I only want this plane. Let's call this box, refill box. I only want the reflection box to affect reflections, not the rest of the lighting. And to do that, I need to go to the render tags and add a Redshift object tag. And I need to go to the visibility. And the visibility controls all the contributions of each object within the execution of the render. And what I want to do now is, first of all, I don't want it to be visible in the primary rays. So I don't want the camera to see it. So that's off. That's why you see this little movement happening. So the camera is not viewing it. The other thing is I don't want it to cast shadows. So I don't want it to block the rest of the light. So there you have it. We are getting the reflections from this. If I turn this off, no reflections, and observe this side of the car. Yes, reflections. So now the object is contributing only to the reflections of the car, which allows us to integrate it a bit more. Now, let's, I'm reading my notes here, so I don't, yep. So now I want to make floor, because you see, we don't have a floor. There is no object that catches the floor. So I usually create a disk, and let's go to object mode and make the disk a bit larger here, because we need something to capture the shadows. And I only want to capture the shadows and some of the reflections over here. So in the same manner, I'm going to add a Redshift object. I'm going to matte. I'm going to override the matte. I'm going to enable this and call it a shadow catcher. And this is not catching a reflection, so I'm going to set the reflection scale to 1. And you can see now it's catching reflections from, well, it's attempting to catch reflections, but the default amount of reflectivity on an object, which doesn't have material, doesn't really exist. So I need to create a new material, Redshift material, that has a reflective component to it. So go to Redshift, Materials, and Standard again. Let's call this ground. And I'm going to apply it over here. You can see now it's catching reflections from everything. I'm going to make this a perfect mirror so I can see exactly what it's catching. So let's go to Reflection, turn off the roughness. Let's remove the base color and set the IOR to, let's say, 10 to make a chrome ball. So now you can see we're catching the reflections of the car. We can see the underpart of the car, but we can also see reflections from everything else, but we don't want these to contribute. So how can we do this? Well, we need to tell the reflection box not to contribute to the reflections that are caught by the disk. So we go to the disk and the exclusion, and we exclude the reflection box. And this is getting too reflective. Why is this becoming white? I need to take a moment to see what I have to do to make this work properly. Let me make sure that my ground material, and let's go to matte, and let me quickly look at my notes. What did I do? Are there any questions, or is everyone seems happy, I guess, or everyone's on holiday today? Let me see what I have here. Let me see my material here. We have the reflection component over here. Good. I'm telling this to, no, I'm telling this to exclude the reflection box. Yes, this is, oh, I'm forgetting something which I shouldn't usually forget because I've seen this before, and I need to figure this one out. I'll figure it out in a second. When someone else takes over. So it's reflecting the walls. Good. No, it's not reflecting the walls. Good. I will take care of that in a second. Okay. The amount of reflection and the blurriness can be controlled by here. So pay attention to the sharp reflections here, and you can increase the roughness a bit to get a bit more rough reflections from the car. And let's just make sure that this extends a bit more. Now, what we see here is that we get too much light on the car over here. You can see there's a lot of light coming, whereas we can see that we have lighting from this side, but not in the middle. And you can just hack your way through solving this problem. I like to create a standard material, which I call black, because it has no rendering components. It's just a black material with no reflection, so perfect black. And I'm going to create a plane. Let's go here, maximize my 3D view, make it narrower, bring it up above the car, and drag this over here. And now I'm going to see, look at that, by moving this around and by changing its size, I'm making it appear that we're getting that light blocking. Now, that's not accurate, but it's good enough if you play with some of these. What are these called, Dustin, in photography?
The flags?
The black.
Yeah, they can be flags or negative
flags.
fill.
Okay, or negative fill. Good. And of course, you can again go to the Redshift object, go to your visibility, and exclude it from primary rays, so it's only visible in reflections. So this is how you would go about optimizing how this is going to look in terms of the lighting conditions. Now, other things you could do is create some rectangles with luminance to catch them as reflections, but it's all just these are all just permutations of what we've done up to this point. And this is the first stage of creating an in-render composition. Now, the question now is, what can you do to get some useful information from this render so that you can potentially use this in compositing? So I am going to make a reference and show a few things about AOVs, or as we call them in Cinema 4D, multipasses. And the one that I find very interesting is the puzzle mat. Yes, the puzzle mat, which uses RGB. Now, it appears to be more confusing than it is, but if you follow some very specific rules, you'll be able to use it effectively in whatever you want to do. So to begin with, I want to have a mask, an alpha channel of the model of the car, so that I can then render this out, use that mask to go to any compositing program and composite it over my final background so I can do whatever I want. We won't do the compositing today, but I'm going to show you how to prepare your render to be able to composite it in Photoshop or After Effects. So let's go first of all and find the AOV manager. Go to the render settings, go to AOVs, and click on the show AOV manager. Let's close this. I'm going to move this left and right. And you go to the P's, and bring in the puzzle mat. Now, I want to be able to see what is rendering in each of my AOVs. And the instinct is to go here and say, okay, puzzle mat, anything you add in the AOV manager is going to be added underneath here. And nothing really will render for a few reasons. The number one thing, well, there are two things that trip people up. Number one is that the default mode is material ID, whereas we are going to use an object ID. And the number two reason is that bucket rendering needs to be enabled. Otherwise, you won't be able to see your AOVs in the render view. And let's first begin by identifying what object or objects we need to add over here to our AOV puzzle mat. I right-click, and once again, I go and add a Redshift object. And in the mat, object ID, I meant. Who said mat? Dustin, why do you say mat?
Could not help it at all.
Okay.
Ha, ha, ha.
So number one, right? I said two, there are three gotchas here. Number one, when you activate it, in order for the puzzle mat to work, this needs to be anything but 0, right? So if you leave it at 0, it will not work. So set this to 1. Now this object, when I say object, I mean the whole hierarchy, because every object inherits this tag. The whole hierarchy, every object in the hierarchy has an ID of 1. And if you set now the mode to object ID, and if you turn on the buckets, you see nothing is happening now. Now these numbers here are the crucial ones that will allow you to create the AOV you want. Each puzzle mat, and you can have multiple puzzle mats, each puzzle mat has the ability to export 3 colors, red, green, and blue. And each one of these is going to render the object ID. When this is set to object ID, you put here. So if I set this to 1, then everything that's under the object ID 1 tag will render red. Now, if I go here and say, okay, what if I want it white? Well, you just set all values to 1. And now it's going to combine the red, green, and blue and create essentially an alpha channel or a mask of that object. And you can use, you can do material IDs, you can do object IDs, and all that nice stuff. Now, there's one little thing to know, that if you click reflect and refract, then what you're going to get is something that contains the reflection and refraction component of anything that has that ID. So in terms of the reflections, wherever the car is reflecting, and see the ground here, we're going to get that in our AOV at the amount. See, this is gray, at the amount based on the amount of reflection we have. At the same time, anything that has refraction, transparency, will be excluded. Now, we do get these black things. These could be because light is refracting in here, and the component that belongs to the car is not visible. Or it could be reverse normals or something like that. I'm not sure in this particular case. I didn't really look into it. But for what it's worth, you can have both of these. If someone says, yeah, how am I going to get only the reflections of the car? Well, you can create the puzzle mat that has only the car without the reflections and refractions. Let's call this car. Then you can create another puzzle mat here that has, again, 1, 1, and 1, 1, 1, and 1 in object ID. And this one will have the reflect and refract ID. So you can go here and say, I want the puzzle mat, and this I will call it refract car or refract car, whatever. It's not just it's reflections and refractions. So now we have these two, and in your compositing software, you can subtract one from the other or do all sorts of other shenanigans. So you can go and add other objects if you have more objects, and use other IDs and use other puzzle mats, or tell it to use the red of this particular puzzle mat with ID 1, the green with ID 2, and the blue with ID 54. And this will create an RGB image. Each one of the channels, red, green, and blue, is going to give you a different object, and so forth. So this makes it rather interesting in the information you can extract from your render in order to use it in compositing. Now, let's see. Yes, and just don't forget to turn on the buckets. Without buckets, it shall not work. All right? With buckets, it shall work. So the three gotchas that will probably get you is: number one, make sure that you have object ID when you're using object IDs in your Redshift object tag. Number two, do not use an object ID of 0. And number three, turn on your buckets if you want to see your AOVs here. And there's a plethora. I would advise you all to go and check out all these. Sometimes you just do a render, you grab everything and you drag it in here just to see what it's going to produce. I mean, why not? Let's just select everything, drag it in here. I don't even know if this is going to work. Oh, yeah. Some of them can be duplicated, but some of them may not be duplicated. And just go through the list and look for anything that is visible to understand if it's useful or not. So I'm going to pass it on and check the questions to who's taking point. I see a lot of people are volunteering themselves.
I can definitely take point if Lionel's not ready yet.
Well, I'm ready, but I think I'm going to talk about fire and Supercomp, so it's on another subject. I think you're a little better to show your hand grenades.
You want to do the rock, paper, scissors we did earlier?
Yeah, we did that offline to see who was going first.
I don't know that Lionel's internet connection is going to keep up.
Do I need to make an executive decision here? Okay, I'm gonna.
I'll take it.
All right, there you go, Dustin, and the little teeny images, and I'm gonna check out questions.
All right, so today we talked a little bit last week. Oh, I don't know why that was scrolling. We see that? Look at there we go. I have unclick. So today we're talking about the stun grenades that I kind of showed a little bit last week, and some of the ways that I would composite these directly into this image. So essentially we're replacing the Coke cans that she's holding with the stun grenades. This same method could also be used for the background. It's really nice because it's a lot of depth of field, so we're not really having to focus too heavily on the details here. So with this setup, what I've done is grouped all of my grenade layers. So we can just call these top. There we go. Now, this whole process that we're doing right now is pretty much the same that I talked about last month. We had a whole month dedicated to Photoshop compositing for the renders. And so I've already gone ahead and organized these different layers. I'm going to use our plugin from CG Hacks, the Smartify layers, to convert all of these layers, all of the selected layers, to smart objects. And I like to do that primarily because it's just giving me the ability to work non-destructively until, of course, I have to break that into a destructive method. And then which at that point, I kind of just save different stages of the project with the stamp visible layers and so on. A bunch of comments going through. I can see them. All right. So looking at this comp, immediately it looks fairly decent. All right. We've kind of matched the key light that's hitting our subject and some of the red light from the background. Now, when I'm doing composites like this and maybe replacing certain elements, say in this case, we're changing from the Coke can to these stun grenades. What I'm going to do is not spend all of the time to cut everything out of the initial photo because I don't know exactly how much I'm really going to have to clean up. So I do a lot of this in post after the fact so that I can work as fast and efficiently as possible. And anything that would need to be cleaned up would just be minimal. So we'll see once we do the overlay here, we can see these little bits of the Coke cans behind her hand there, maybe not even so much on the other side. And then I just have to mask this out by her hand. So I can start by doing that here immediately. So what I'm going to do is select the layer mask that I have, and I'll create a new alpha channel and call this grenades. So this is going to allow me just to have a backup of this layer mask as I start to get into painting it out. Now, what I generally like to do is take this down just a little bit in the opacity, maybe something like this here. Then I can zoom in, and with a black brush, I can just paint this away from my subject's hand. I'm using a mouse right now, so it's a little bit awkward for me compared to a tablet. But it gets pretty easy overall. So we can just go ahead and mask this out. Right now, I'm just doing kind of a garbage mask. I don't mind my zooming. I feel like it's sticking quite a bit more than normal. And now I'm going to, with a white brush, just kind of add some of this back in here towards the bottom side. Not that we'll see it even a ton, but it might be nice just to have some of that in here. There we go. And now this is all, like I said, more of a garbage mask. I'm just going to try the click method here so that hopefully it's not zooming in and out too much. So with a black brush again, I can remove from her hand, and we'll leave just the little piece underneath. Now, this is something that we can sort of talk about here a moment. Usually on the underside of things like this, if I'm not seeing the can underneath, then we can just continue up the top here, and we don't really have to worry so much about what's underneath. We'll just assume that it's hidden. I can remove the pin here. There we go. And then I'm going to follow up the other side with her hand. And of course, we can take quite a bit more time to do this. This is just kind of, we'll say, a bit more of a slap comp to show the process. There we go. Now what I'll do is I'll turn this off and on and see what I missed. So it looked like I did miss quite a bit there with her finger. So I'll just bring this all the way down. There we go. And then I'm just switching back and forth between the foreground and background color being black and white, trying to get as much of this out of here as possible. And I painted with the wrong brush. That happens all the time. It's all good. There we go. So we'll leave this here at this point, and we can see that once we bring this back to 100%, it looks for the most part like she is holding these grenades. Now, we can go in and paint different shadows, have slightly ambient shadows, and so on. We've talked a little bit about that last month, so I won't go into too far of detail. But now at this point, what I would want to do, holy cow, that is way crazy. Super sensitive today. So what we do want to do is start to fix some of these edges of the original Coke can. So for that, what I'll do is I'll select our background layer and then head up to create another layer and call this paint. So at least we know what we're doing here as we start to move on. So this is going to be a bit of maybe painting and clone stamping. So we'll try the clone stamp first. And what we want to make sure that we have is our sampling method to current and below. So that's going to select anything, all of the pixels below this layer, which is our background currently, and allow us to sample those and bring them up. And so I can simply select and just start painting in right behind this. Now, there are times where you may want to zoom in just a little bit. I've used a bit of a harder brush so that we can get right around this finger here without it getting in the way. But overall, this process is pretty quick and painless. Now, the other option that we have instead of using the clone stamp is actually using the heel brush. So we can also do a current and below. And what this is going to do is try to maintain as much of the texture that we have underneath. And so you can see how we're able to just paint some of this in very quickly. And we can start to maintain some of those textures without carrying the color and the texture all over from the clone stamp. So this is one area. When you get to areas like this where they're quite contrasting in color, you're going to get this weird kind of a halo. And this is often where, you know, something like a clone stamp is really going to help out. So I can switch back to the clone stamp tool. Maybe use a smaller brush size, feather it out just a little bit, and then we can just paint in behind here. So especially since this is, you know, kind of a more grainy image, right? Like I don't have to worry so much about the specific details that we have there. It's just making sure that we get everything cleaned up in a way that's going to look good. So we'll head back to our heel brush, see if we can clean up some of this area, maybe the clone stamp to bring some of that lighter color over a little bit will benefit some. There we go. All right. So at this point, even for a fairly quick composite, this is all starting to really take shape. And so what we need to do now is pretty much add some of the more realistic details to closer match our subject's plate to our 3D render that we have. So, you know, I did talk about it quite a bit last month, and the fact that when you're compositing 3D with photography or video, usually you're going to have to destroy one of them. Most times it's going to be the render that we're going to, you know, start to add different grains, chromatic aberrations, imperfections, and things like that too, because we want to match our original plate. And so in this case here, we're wanting to take a lot of this, you know, kind of methodology and move that towards the still side. So what we can do here, one of the things that I like most is to select our main layer. We can kind of hide everything underneath for the moment. And we're going to use the camera raw to start to implement some maybe clarity pops. This is going to treat this almost as if it's a raw photograph where I'm able to go in and adjust the shadows, the highlights, the contrast, things like that, and really start to add some detail here. So what I'm going to do is slightly raise the exposure. And we'll see here with the shadows how that's working. Let's zoom in just a little bit here. So this is just giving a little bit of more fill here to the one side, opposite of the key light. And then if I take our black point, we can see that's really starting to crush and clip out some of those black areas. So I don't think that we need that too much. Now, once we get down to the texture and clarity, these are something that I usually use locally, but since this is actually on our render, it's already a bit more local, so we don't have to worry about it. But texture is going to take kind of your more large and medium details and start to add a bit of a punch to those. And clarity is a little bit different than contrast, where contrast will take your brights and your darkest points and kind of, like accentuate those a bit. The clarity is your it's adjusting your kind of like mid grays, right? So all of your, I'm trying to think of the name now. I'm having a brain fart. But it's like micro contrast enhancement. So it's going to take all of those midtones and start to crunch those values. So if we go up too high, you can see that we get halos and things like that. We can leave that just a bit lower. And now, since we don't have our original plate behind this, because the render is just this one image, we can actually add some grain to it and kind of just get a visual key. And so the nice part about this is that it is all non-destructive at this point, because it will be applied as a smart filter since we made that render layer a smart object. So we can go back and forth and kind of tweak things. But what we're going to do is actually add some grain. We know that we have quite a grainy image, so I'll set maybe somewhere around 30. And then we can adjust this a little bit as needed. Let's click OK here. There we go. And we can see that already this is matching it pretty well. I feel like our black point could be raised. So when we look at areas, maybe like her hair here, that black point definitely gets a bit muted. So we could go back into the camera raw side of this, or we can choose to just head maybe straight into like a levels or a curves adjustment to adjust the black point. So I like curves a little bit more, so we can grab a curves adjustment layer. Hopefully this is a little bit easier to see. It's kind of a small window here. And now we can really start to adjust some of these values. And so there are a couple different ways to make this a bit faster. So now we have our curves layer. If we select our kind of RGB or like the thumbnail here instead of our layer mask, what we can do is actually match this grenade, there we go, to the background colors quite a bit better than they currently sit, and do this in kind of more of an automatic way. So kind of a special hotkey is the Alt key or Option, I believe, right? It's Option on Mac, Alt or Option. There we go. So if we hold down Alt or Option and we click on Auto, this is going to bring up a new auto color correction options dialog box. So we can click on Find Dark and Light Colors. We'll see that it changes a little bit. But what we'll do at this point is use our color picker here. And now we can select one of these colors from the background, and we can see how this is already changing. So as a general rule of thumb, you want to select the darkest point in your background when you're doing shadows that's not completely black, right? You don't want it like void of all color, because at that point we're just going to have, it's going to look off slightly. So what I'm going to do is select right up somewhere around where this grenade actually is. So I'll select her hair here. And then for the white point, maybe we'll select a little bit closer. Let's get in. There we go. Click OK on this one. And then for the white point, we're going to look for one of the brightest areas. So in this shot, we do have kind of a clipped out area here on her watch. That is a bit odd, but we do have some of these more greenish values that are getting carried over, onto her skin tone and so on. So what I'll do is I'll select one of these, and then we can adjust from there as needed. And that actually doesn't look so bad. So at this point, we'll click OK. And we do not want to save these target colors as defaults. This is something that I've done a few times on accident, and it gets annoying because you start off going into this thinking you'll have black shadows and white highlights, and then you actually get to a point then where you already have preset colors and your image looks weird, and I wouldn't save those unless you're using it for a specific project where you need that redundancy. All right. So at this point, we have a fairly decent composite. Now we could sharpen this up quite a bit. We can see here that this is fairly sharp on the glasses. So there are a couple ways that I would do this. One way is to create a stamp visible layer inside of here, which is our comp group with the layer mask. And what this is going to allow us to do is head up to our filters, sharpen, and then we could add something like an unsharp mask. And we can see here that we can really pump this up quite a bit. We can adjust the radius, which, judging by her glasses and the way that these small little halos are working, there's quite a bit of sharpening going on in that area. What are we doing, guys?
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, I was just a teaser. So go ahead.
It's just a teaser of what we've got going on.
Lionel, you did it again.
You did it again. All right. So the cool part about the unsharp mask is that you have the ability, just like inside of Camera Raw, to go and adjust the amounts, the radius, and then the threshold, and we can really start to fine tune where that sits. Now, another thing that we can do to this is go in and, add some different bits of maybe blurring. So we can talk about that in something like this. This would be much more of a quick composite that I might not worry about so much, especially if it's something that's going on maybe social media. I could very closely consider this thing almost done. But if we did want to go in and add just a slight blur to this, the way that I like to do that is by heading into filter. Now we can use the blur gallery and go directly to field blur. That's a little bit better for something that you need to have quite a bit more realistic, like, bokeh and being able to see all of, the individual bokeh areas. But in this case, we may be able to just get away with something like a Gaussian blur with a bit of a low radius. You definitely don't need a whole lot here because most of our hand is sharp, but this would just help disrupt our, kind of perfection that we already have going on here. So once we add that back in, we can kind of redo maybe some of our sharpening. So we'll create a new stamp visible layer. And we can head back down to sharpen and then unsharp mask. The other method that we could use for this, just like we did before, is going to convert it to a smart object. And then we can use our Camera Raw on this as well for the sharpening. So we'll just talk about those two main methods. If you're getting into like high level, professional, like I don't even know what you would need it for, but there's so many different ways to sharpen things. Some are contrast based, some of them are sharpening as we see now. But there's a ton of different methods, especially in the world of photography, that we use to sharpen things. But when it comes to compositing and getting projects done and knowing what corners you can cut where, this is definitely helpful once you get into this space. So to sharpen inside of Camera Raw, it's very similar to Lightroom. We head down to our little detail drop down, and this is going to give us the sharpening that we can see here. And now, while we are affecting the whole image, because we have this all layer masked off, it's only going to affect just the grenade once it's all said and done. So I can bring up my sharpening detail. We have our radius like we did before. We have the detail, which is kind of like the micro details in it. It's pretty cool. Sometimes that can get to be a lot, especially with different skin conditions. Now, in the masking section, this gets a little bit difficult to see if you're just dragging the slider. But again, we can use the Alt Option key, hold that down, and now we're able to see that threshold that masking is going to give us. And so we can bring this in just to select some of those larger details. We can release it and then click the eyeball icon on and off, and we can see how that sharpening is working. So basically what we've done is we've added some grain, we blurred it, we add a little bit more, here and there, and then we're sharpening on top of that. And so when you're doing composites like this, it's good to find a workflow. A lot of times we did the blurring after, but my personal approach is I get in, I add some of that depth of field first, and then I add the grain, and then I add some of the sharpening on top of that, chromatic aberration, what have you. Because a lot of times, like, that's what, we're doing once we get to, say, like a raw photograph that we're pulling through Lightroom. The blur or the depth of field is already set. There may be some grain in the image, but if I'm compositing into that, I'm thinking about a lot of the different photography workflows that I would be using. So now we can go ahead and click OK. And there we go. She has a grenade. And at this point, the last part of this that I would really go into depth with if we needed to, but check out last month's stream so we can move a little bit forward and get to Lionel here in a minute. One of the last parts about this is actually painting in some of these shadows that we would have from the hand, right? So light is great, but light without shadow can just look weird. So what I like to do in this case is oftentimes I can grab a solid color adjustment layer. We'll find an area here that is shadowed, something like that. You can click OK. And now we can invert this layer mask, and we'll set this to multiply. There we go. So now with the layer mask selected, I'm going to grab a white brush and maybe take the flow down. So the flow is going to allow us to build this up a bit. It's a little bit different with a tablet because you can have your pressure sensitivity, control some of this. With a mouse, it gets to be a little bit more difficult. But here with a white brush, now we can go in and we can actually start to paint in some of these shadows that we would actually have from our hands. So it makes it a little bit less awkward and believable. The side of my mask here on the bottom, I can totally see that. There we go. I'll just kind of fake it. All right. So on the other side, I don't think we actually have too much here to worry about. If we wanted to blend this in quite a bit better, we would maybe have a little bit more shadow that would wrap into some of these other areas. But a lot of that is really just small details that we might not actually really have to focus on too much. So for today's topic in Photoshop compositing with Dustin, yeah, we swapped out some Coke cans for stun grenades. So
that's fantastic.
Until next week.
Really cool stuff. And that's how
what
it's
are we
done.
doing next week? Is this ending already? Oh my goodness. It's the end of the month.
And that's how it's done by the professionals.
You fudge it until you make it.
People are mesmerized. People are mesmerized. Excellent. Let's move on. Sorry, Dustin, your time's up. Let's move on to Lionel's screen. So I'm gonna. Are you decent, Lionel? Shall I bring up your screen?
Yes, yes. Now you can.
Ba, ba, ba. There we go.
All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about Supercomp and how to composite. Well, very, very shortly, very summarized. How to composite 3D fire. So this comes from Pyro. But as you can see, if we zoom a little bit, there's something going on with the heat blur. So yeah, the effect is very harsh because I wanted to be clear. But as you can see, we have some heat blur, some chromatic displacement, because the fire is going to generate heat, and then it's going to make everything less precise. And that just makes the composite layer. There is also the glow and so on. So just a little bit, very quickly, let me show you what I've done inside Cinema 4D. So this is a very simple pyro nothing nothing special. The only thing I would say a bit special is the voxel size is very low. This is key if you want to have a very fine fire. Very often people try to have fine looking fire with a lot of details with the too high voxel. That won't work. Okay, if you want to have details, you have to lower your voxel size, and that's going to fill your memory, your GPU memory. But that's the only way, one of the only way right now to have some details. But the basic fire is pretty simple. If we take a look here at our burning title pyro, which comes straight from Cinema is this. So it looks okay, it looks decent, but as you can see, there is no heat blur, there is no glow, nothing, because we haven't worked on it. And with Supercomp, we can get this result, which is very easy to get and very, very customizable. That means you can change the background, you can lower the amount of heat blur, lower the amount of optical glow, of the glow effect, and so on. So yeah, because it's already late, I'm not going to do it from scratch, but just show you how it looks in Supercomp. So Supercomp is the effect from Redshift. I think it's a personal project from Stu Maschwitz, who has an amazing tutorial on YouTube about it if you want to really have the details. But it's meant to be used with footage. Okay, it's for compositing footage, but it works quite well with 3D element, because I repeat, everything here is 3D except for the background, of course. And I just cross-structured this out of the render pass. So about the render pass, let me show you. Here we have our different render pass. So let's go back to Cinema 4D very, very quickly, and maybe fire up the render. Well, no, I won't do that because I'm not very confident about Supercomp and Redshift and the GPU all working together. But here I can show you in the AOV manager that I added all those paths. So the beauty path is the final composite with everything. Reflection, specular lighting, this is for the title. This is for the actual 3D mesh. And then you have here volume lighting, volume fog tint, volume fog emission. You need those if you want to composite environment, volume light, and so fire. Okay, so I have all those in my multi-layer EXR. It's all done in OCIO. And if we took a look at the different passes, so this is the volume lighting. The volume fog, which is very interesting. This one is to be composited with multiply, but I used it in a different way, you'll see. And we have the volume fog emission, volume fog emission, where you can see the emission of the light of the fire through the smoke, okay? And then specular lighting, which is only the fire. And most interesting here, the reflection. Reflection, we have the fire with the natural light wrap around it and some flames going in front. Actually, it's not flames, it's the reflection of the flames. Okay, and they all together, we get this. So it's all inside Supercomp. What you need to do, well, maybe I can just do that very quickly. Let's do it maybe from, yeah, I'm going to take all those, put them inside a composition. Okay, and you have the fog tint. Those two need to be in add mode. Actually, this one only. So let's go to add. This is only the title only. Then we have this one on multiply. I'm going to turn it on. We don't say anything because it works with the two other, which are on add mode. Okay, and then we have our fire. Of course, I need to turn them on. Okay, and here the volume fog tint. Yeah, and here we can already see it's already tiny details. You see? Just hide a bit of the back of the the title. And then if you want to use, well, that works already. We could use just optical glow with this. But if you want to use Supercomp, you're going to take any one of them and then use Supercomp, put the effect on it. Then it's going to create a layer with Supercomp, open the Supercomp panel where you have all your layer. And then you're going to add your layer on top of each other, and make sure to use additive mode for everything that's additive and normal mode for everything that's normal. And adjustment, well, we'll see in my final comp. As I said, it's a bit late to show everything, but if we go back to our final composition, here we have Supercomp, okay? Then we can see here, let's just slide, so we have the maximum here. We have, well, actually, this one, I don't need it from the comp. Oh, yes, I need to delete it from there. Okay, those two are going to work side by side. Anything I remove from this is going to be removed from this one, okay? And everything will exist on the Supercomp layer on top of it, okay? So here I have all my comps. And what I did is added a background, okay? And let's turn off all the different effects to see what's going on. So this is the title with the specular and the reflection. Okay, so this is the only, there is no flames because the flames are separate. Okay, and on this, I just added a color correction. So let's reset the effect. And color correction, if you just click on the match background, it's going to take the color of the background and try to correct the layer. Okay, and here, well, it works pretty well, but I think I'm going to lower the amount. So it's going to blend more nicely with the background. Okay, the second effect here is the edge blend. So the edge blend is going to blend the background on top of the composite. And this one is the light wrap. Light wrap is going to wrap the light from this on top of the composite. So maybe let's try to import another, yes, another layer. I have this one. So if I put it right there, it's going to appear here. You can see this is blue sky in French. So if I put it just there, it's going to change everything. And the beauty of Supercomp, the real trick with Supercomp, is that all the color correction, so match background again, you see, it's very strong, of course, because it's a blue sky. It's going to work in tandem. It's going to work in duo with everything. So here our edge blend and especially our light wrap is going to work depending on this background. And that's really cool. Okay, then let's keep this one for now. I added this one, volume light, and well, let's see here. This is the volume lighting, so this is only the flames. Okay, and here we have just a heat blur. So heat blur is going to blur everything that's behind. Okay, we can see here without, you can see the text is warped and blurred, and also the background. This one chromate is to get more of the flames, because when you use additive mode, you're going to get something white, especially on a clear background like this. So the chromate is going to get your alpha back. Okay, and this one is optical glow, maybe the most important, because it's going to give the glow. You can see the effect here. Very important when you use fire. You must have glow. Anything that use light. Okay, and the last one here, our volume fog emission, is going to add another layer of fire, where I used the same heat blur but with different settings. Okay, and let's go back to the volume fog tint. So I used it here in another way. I used it as an adjustment layer, because our volume fog tint is a black and white effect. So it's not meant to be used like that, but I think the effect is interesting because I'm going to use the black and white value to add here some displacement. Okay, so it's going to displace the fire, everything that's behind, and give us this effect of fire. You can see very strong. So because it's too strong, I would think I'm going to lower it now. Let's tiny amount. That should be enough. And we have this effect of the flames eating through the metal. So that works pretty well with 3D. And maybe let's go back to our blue sky, and I'm going to, of course, we can use it with the usual tools. I'm going to put a curve on our blue sky, just make it darker. Maybe desaturate a little bit. So let's put some hue saturation and decrease a little bit the saturation. And let's hit render. And that's it. So this is really a test to see if it works, and I think it works pretty well. It's interesting to dig deeper on that. I'm going to do that for sure. Anyway, I shouldn't tell you this, but everything has been done in like 2 hours, because I was going to show something else, and then Noseman say, "Hey, Lionel, can you show me Supercomp?" And I say, "Yeah, why not?"
It's all my fault. It's all my fault.
Oh yes, I had to accuse you, of course. But
Thank you.
actually, I tried. I played with Supercomp before, but now we have Pyro. Pyro and Supercomp work very well together, because with Pyro you can have some convincing fire really quickly.
Is it true that the conception of Supercomp was predominantly to put VFX on footage, like explosions and stuff like that? I don't know if that's a rumor or not.
Oh yes, well, Stu said it so in the tutorial.
Oh, he did say it. Maybe I heard it and I forgot, and it's just a memory that's coming up, because that does happen. Fantastic. That's excellent stuff. And a really great thing you can pull off in 15 minutes. Oh, sorry, 2 hours. So, well, there don't seem to be any questions. Any questions have been answered. Hopefully everyone is okay. Let's put our beautiful faces up here. This one? No, this one here. There we go. So yes, this concludes our 5 episodes of demystifying post-production, compositing 3D elements, and so forth. Now, there is a ton of more stuff that can be taught on the subject. If you wish to have more on this subject, or to propose other subjects, then all you have to do is go and send an email to, I'm looking through the things here. There you go. Email askthetrainer@maxon.net to suggest topics for future Ask the Trainer and Demystifying series. Always ask your questions. The team is eager to help. And let me do my final housekeeping, where it's over here. And let me put it full screen. Don't forget to visit the Maxon.net page for news, information, and anything else you need to know about Maxon products. Go check out what events are available online and in face-to-face, because these are happening now. Where is the world going with this? And visit our YouTube channels, the Maxon Training Team, the Maxon YouTube channel, the Giant YouTube channel, and so forth, where all the content is hosted. And all these recordings will be up in a few hours for you to watch, with timestamps provided by our amazing Dr. Thanassis, because he's the only one that has the attention to detail to be able to pull these things off. I would actually mess things up. If you want to become a certified Pro Cinema 4D Pro user or a certified trainer, please go to the certification page on the Maxon website. Check out any potential design and animation tour events that are happening close to where you are. You can meet artists and you can collaborate and see the people behind the screens. And of course, now it's been fixed. There was a bit of a glitch. You go to the Maxon Ask the Trainer swag page, which is this one over here. There you go. And you use the code Compositing 3D, all caps, to get your free swag. And I think that's valid until the end of the month, if I'm not mistaken. If that's not the case, I didn't tell you to do so. Go to udemy.com and check out, let's put our faces back here again, and check out Lionel's courses, and using this code will give you a hefty 75% discount. Also, go to Dustin's YouTube channel, youtube.com/@cghacks, or his website to check out what he's been up to lately. Although he regularly appears on this show, so he's always, well, what are you up to? Demystifying post-production and stuff like that. So I would like to thank everyone for being a part of this little 5-week adventure. And I'll be seeing you around. And yeah, don't miss any of our other shows. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you later, everybody. Bye.